The death, the Santa Muerte, almost took my cousin's military fellows for stealing its money. Mexican and on here, and the photo is not mine. Sorry if I misspell my English, but fuck it. Here is the context. The Santa Muerte, the death, is a well-known and controversial entity here. It's almost like a god that some people worship for health, wealth, or protection. If you ever come here, you will see some rural markets selling statues and incense so that you can become one of its followers. It's an entity that you must show great respect and discretion for, or else it will fuck you over one way or another. I am new here, so I will try and make a silly attempt of a greentext about this experience that my retired army cousin told me about. Be my cousin in the middle of a military mission. The mission is about searching and rescue for a pair of kidnapped siblings. They are the children of some important corrupt politician. The ones responsible for the kidnappings are members of a drug cartel. Typical. My cousin at the time is driving a military vehicle with his superiors and colleagues on board. They are all armed and ready to hit this cartel with everything that they have. They are all heading to a remote rural town that is almost in the middle of nowhere, following a clue about a suspicious old woman in the case. It's a weird and shitty town. All of the boys can immediately feel the rejection of the reserved inhabitants. But the boys do not give a fuck and continue crossing the town until they reach the house of the suspicious old woman, which is much further away from the town. It is the ugliest house you have ever seen. It is no more than 9.9 by 9.9 feet tall. It is built with dried palm bark. The extreme poverty is very visible. The boys find the suspicious old woman inside. She is as wrinkled as a raisin. There is nothing but an old stone kitchen and a suspicious rug in the middle of the small house. The hag plays the innocent and helpless granny card. The boys do not fall for her crap and they subdue her. The hag immediately shows her true colors and screams like a crazy bitch, cursing the boys. But the boys do not give a fuck and immediately remove the suspicious carpet in the middle of the room. My face when they find a metal trap door that leads to a secret basement. We let the rookie watch the hag while everyone else goes down to investigate. Fucking shit. This place is big, and it's a fucking prostitution and human trafficking business. The boys clear the place out. They find abused girls and some cartel accomplices. Inside a small room, they find the missing siblings kidnapped and gagged, but they are unharmed. Unfortunately, that is not the most messed up thing that the boys find. My cousin continues clearing the room until, at the end of the room, he finds a large imposing door in front of him. The hairs on my cousin's body immediately stand up, but he does not give a fuck because he is cool and he opens the damn door. My face when he finds a fucking statue of the deaf that is over 8 feet tall inside, almost like the attached image. My cousin freezes, almost as stiff as the statue, lol. Below the statue lies a strange but large triangular altar with dozens of lit candles surrounding it. But what stands out the most are the hundreds of bills surrounding and taped to that strange altar. My cousin estimates and theorizes that there could easily be 2 million pesos, $103,000. Holy mother of God. My cousin immediately yells at the boys to come and see this shit. The boys arrive, and immediately they freeze like logs. No one says a word for a long time. The atmosphere in that cold room is morbid and heavy. The boys decide to leave that shit for last after clearing the perimeter. After clearing the entire perimeter and evacuating the victims, it's time to finally face that room. No one really has the balls, but the boys have to do it reluctantly. The boys don't really know what to do, but their commander does not agree. The commander orders the boys to collect the money from the altar. The boys back off, not daring to touch that shit. The commander calls them all pussies and cowards, lol. The commander is visibly frustrated by the situation, so to take away the fear from the boys, he draws his rifle. My face when the commander blows the 8 feet statue hard with the butt of his rifle, breaking the ceramic. My face when inside the statue are bags and bags of drugs hidden inside. Perfect. The commander goes mad and continues smashing the statue with pure hatred. The boys watch in disbelief. The boys have no choice but to give in, and they begin to pocket all of the money. The boys leave, seemingly victorious, but they are not at ease. They head back across the town and leave that fucking place once and for all. The atmosphere is totally different now, and my cousin can sense that his companions feel it too, due to the heavy silence between them. Anyway, the boys cross the town again, but this time on foot. A female resident who came out of nowhere approaches them and says, "You guys are carrying something that does not belong to you." What the fuck? The boys turn paler than they already were. How did this woman know? The boys did not ask her about it. The commander lowered his pride and tucked his tail between his legs, immediately knowing that this was bigger than they had even thought. Without beating around the bush, they asked the woman where they should leave what they had taken. The female resident tells the boys to go to a place even further from the town. She says they will find a statue there, and that they should leave the stolen goods at the statue's feet. But that is not fucking all. You guys have to leave the stolen goods at the statue's feet, apologize sincerely and repentantly, and then leave, without looking back. That is what the woman instructed. My face when the woman adds, "You must absolutely not look back for anything in the world, or else it will kill you all." The boys begin to sweat cold, but they try to maintain their composure in front of the townspeople. With their tails between their legs, they get into the vehicle and head in the indicated direction. No one says anything along the way. Total silence, too wrapped up in their own thoughts. Several minutes passed on the uneven dirt road, with my cousin at the wheel. But wait, holy shit. My cousin says it was just a blink. In a fucking blink, and then that thing appeared. A fucking person, dressed in long black clothes, with a hood, appeared in front of the vehicle out of nowhere. The boys in the vehicle jerk, and tell my cousin to go to hell for the sudden stop. But my cousin is more preoccupied by staring in shock at the thing standing in front of them. The shitty commander moves into the front seat to berate my cousin. "Hey, why the fuck are you stopping?" At that point, my cousin comes out of a shock and responds with growing nervousness. "Why? Look for yourself in front of him, Commander." Commander's face. The most oppressive silence of your life was felt again, with only the sound of the vehicle's engine growing. That thing, which kept its face lowered and covered by its black hood, did not move from its place and just remained there. The boys were all scared shitless, with an unusual cold that penetrated their bones, something I forgot to mention before. "So, what do I do now, Commander?" my cousin asked nervously, with no one taking their eyes off of that chilling figure. "Nothing. Just keep going, but be careful." But before my cousin could do anything, the damn thing disappeared right before their eyes. My cousin's face and the commander again. No one said anything, too scared to speak. My cousin had no choice but to keep going, too slowly and carefully with the vehicle. It seemed like an eternity, but the boys finally arrived at the right place. My face went. They see another damn giant stone statue of the deaf in the middle of the plains. They are too scared and fed up to even wonder what kind of damn town this is. With their legs shaking, the boys got out of the vehicle with the bag of money in their hands and approached the new scary statue very cautiously. The boys carefully left the stolen money at the statue's feet, just as the woman had instructed them to. After that, one by one, the boys went to show their sincerest apologies to the statue, apologizing for everything they had done to it. My cousin says it was a very strange moment. Armed and imposing soldiers apologizing profusely to an inanimate statue. But absolutely no one complained or protested. The boys just acted as if something important depended on it. After showing their apologies and respect, the moment arrived. All of the boys reminded each other to follow the woman's orders and not to look back as they walked away for anything in the world. And so they did, walking slowly and upright back toward the vehicle, all at the same time and without looking back. When the boys reached the vehicle and got inside, curiosity got the better of them because they are stupid. My face went. They turned to look back and the money had completely disappeared. What the actual fuck? My cousin said it was surprising and terrifying because there seemed to be no trace of any money being left at the statue's feet. There was no one around, and it seemed as if it had vanished out of nowhere. But the real shit was about to begin. From here on, my cousin's memories are hazy. Almost immediately after witnessing that, other people with guns ambushed and attacked the boys, presumably other cartel members. The boys, who were already shitting themselves, shit themselves even more. They were not at their best to deal with that other huge piece of shit. So, cowardly, but intelligently, they simply ran away from there at full speed, not wanting anything more to do with the place. My cousin only remembers sweating, and sweating while driving like a maniac, trying to escape the bullets. Although, looking back, my cousin thinks he and his other buddies really could have died that night. He thinks that if they had not returned the money, they probably would not have had the same luck. He is fine now, although a little screwed up from everything else that happened to him in the army. He has more stories to tell, like the time he saw another group of cartel members shoot at something in the sky that shot out a huge beam of light that lit up the day. I don't know if I will make another post, but I will leave this one here, and you can do whatever you want with it. Be me. I was around 10 or so years old, give or take a couple of years. I have experiences here and there growing up in the house. Nothing too major, just enough to spook the horses. I am taking a piss. I finish and open up the door to leave. I realize I forgot to wash my hands. I return to the sink, wash my hands, and then dry them off. I turn back towards the open door. My heart drops. I still do not know how to describe what I saw. It was a creature shorter than me, reminiscent of a malevolent ET. This was no hallucination. I was staring right at the thing. It was a horrible fucking vibe. The creature shrieks and flails its arms. I scream too. The creature bolts towards the living room, and I mean bolts, speed of light. I realize that my sister and my mom are in there. I am terrified, but I run after it. I get into the living room. My mom and sister stare at me like, what the fuck? I'm like, where did it go? They have no idea what I am talking about. I run into the adjacent rooms, looking for any sign of it. My mom is freaking out at this point. They did not see it or hear it shrieking, and that is reason one of many why I use drugs. Alright, well, there was this old hospital near where I used to live. It started as a tuberculosis hospital, then was converted into a mental institution, and then into an old folks home. Then they just shut it down entirely. One of my college friends was a photographer / urban explorer / graffito, and when he heard abandoned mental institution, he wanted in. It is all closed off, but there is no security besides the fences. It's easy to get in. So in we went, during the day obviously, and we were there for hours, just exploring and looking over stuff. Lots of medication and medical files were left behind. We did not have to worry about pissing off anyone squatting there, because this is miles away from anyone. All the junkies and dealers hid out in the opposite direction in an old abandoned mansion. We did get the odd glimpse of someone wandering around, but he just seemed to be looking around like us. He is leaving us alone, and we are leaving him alone. Everything is fine. We finally came out around dusk, and walked straight into a pretty large circle of guys in hoods, dancing around a fire. That was a little awkward. Needless to say, they were not too happy at some outsiders wandering in. We were shitting ourselves. No one knew we were there, and no one would bother looking in the hospital, because what kind of fucking idiot goes exploring in an abandoned hospital / old folks home? Then one of the hoods recognizes me and takes off his hood. I used to help him with his chemistry homework. He took us out of there, drove us away, and just said, "Stay the fuck out of there. That is our place now." He then drove us directly to my house. Hey, hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you want to hear more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment because it lets YouTube know you like the content and helps more people to see these videos. My next big goal for the channel is 100,000 subscribers, and as a celebration, I will be doing a Q&A video once we hit that goal. Thank you, and back to the stories. Yes, I landed right in a conspiracy. Langley AFB. A lot of people know that the US Air Force is an organized criminal conspiracy, but the first time I was abducted by the US Air Force, I was in the 2nd grade. My dad was stationed at Langley AFB, which I did not know at the time, works for the CIA, which is totally illegal a few years later. I found out from my stepfather that US Army Special Forces also works for the CIA, which is also still totally illegal. The US federal government does not follow its own rules and regulations. Anyway, back then, I didn't know yet how bad things really are. There was an open house day at the base, and I was excited about going to it. There were lots of planes parked near the maintenance hangars, and we were invited to come and see them all, including the inside all the planes. At the time, I wanted to be a pilot, so it was a huge deal to me. I waited my turn for a long time, and I finally had my turn to sit in the pilot seat of a real US Air Force airplane. There was a guy that was there for security, to make sure nobody really touched anything. Look, but do not touch. The crowd had wandered off to see other planes, so there was nobody there except me and the security guy. He took that opportunity to abduct me. As he was dragging me away toward a truck, he told another security guy, "I got mine. Did you get yours yet?" The other guy said, "Not yet, but I will." "Well, I already got my $50. You have to get one too, if you want your $50. And he spent enough time talking that my dad saw what was up, and he told the security guy that he was going to kill him. And he kept telling him that he was going to kill him. And he said it so many times that I think that maybe he did kill him. It happens all the time on a military base. That's what they call a training accident. It turned out that my dad was his boss, so there was no way he was taking me anywhere. At the end of the day, I was right there with my dad, and he was talking to the same 2 guys that were on security duty. He asked them, and they told him. They had each gotten a kid. They had the kids locked up, and the 2 families were still there on Langley AFB, looking for their kids. These 2 guys had gotten the APs involved, and the APs were convincing families that they need to leave the base and report the missing children to the civilian police. When the 2 families left the base, that was it. They were never getting their kids back. Back then, I had no idea why the US Air Force was abducting children, but now I know. They also have another program that you have probably heard about, because books have been written about it, and there have been websites and video channels dedicated to it. Folks call it Project Montauk, because it is located on Point Montauk. That is where the US Air Force has a joint base with the US Army, another criminal operation. The base is called Camp Hero. Many thousands of abducted children have been murdered there, but they were taking me for a different program. The US Air Force trades children to the reptilians for technology. It's not even good technology, and the US Air Force knows that all the reptilians ever give them is burned out, useless, obsolete junk. But those junk parts came out of technology that is thousands of years ahead of what the US Air Force had at the time, but they are catching up quickly. They also know what the reptilians do with the children. They terrorize them, torture them, assault them, and when they are through with them, they begin ripping them apart and eating them while they are still alive. That is what happened to those other 2 kids, and that is what they were going to let the reptilians do to me. All because an airman will get paid $50 bounty for turning in a kid for the program. The airman don't care. He was going to have a big weekend on the $50. This is what he was talking about to the other airmen, and that is how he spent too much time talking, and let my dad see what was going on. Also, while my dad was stationed at Langley, there was one airman that they had decided to kill. I never heard what the reason was. They decided to let the APs take care of it, just make it look like an accident. The APs are always immortal psychopaths, and usually kill them the most gruesome way they can think of, and the officers all enjoy it too. The way the APs chose went way overboard, but they didn't get in any trouble for it. The guy they wanted to kill was in a group of about 12 guys that had to strip the wax off the floor of a building. A couple of APs helped them by showing them an easy way to strip the wax off the floor, which is to get a 5-gallon can of gas from the motor pool and pour that on the floor, and the wax will come off easy. When the gasoline was all over the floor, from outside, they turned the breaker to the heater on. When the natural gas heater fired up, it lit the gas on the floor, and all 12 men burned alive because the APs locked them in the building. Another training accident. Be me, Bradley Gunner in a woods in Hohenfels, Deutschland. Middle of the rotation, cold as fuck, at 33% security at night. Be my shift, get up in the turret with my whoopee, flip on thermals. Waiting for thermals to cool so they work. Hear what sounds like a smoke grenade hissing outside. Pop hatch, see nothing, can tell the sound is outside, but cannot determine direction. Woods are quiet as absolute fuck. All I can hear is the refrigerant pump in the ISU running and that hiss. Hear a pop, still cannot determine location. Think Op 4 is about to fuck us up. Bring rifle up. My body is ready. Wait 2 minutes, scanning, nothing happens. Oh shit, thermal's ready. Get down. Close hatch, because it's fuck you cold outside. Look through thermals. See some shit, like the pic here. Throw open hatch. Look. Nothing. Get back down. Look in thermals. Ghost dude, still standing exactly like he was, just 10 meters closer. Pop head up. Don't see shit. Look in thermals again. All I see is white heat. Check magnification, at 3x. See slight movement. Then ghost dude steps out from in front of the ISU. See everything clearly again. Motherfucker was standing on the driver hatch. Went to close hatch. Cold as fuck. Pic related. My buddy was deployed in Afghanistan in 2007 at FOB Wilson as part of an Arty regiment. He sometimes will talk about the only time he watched men from his regiment fire directly on an enemy. Apparently, 2 locals shambled up to the wall surrounding the FOB and began tearing apart and devouring a dog laying dead outside the compound. According to him, they were yelled at, screamed at to leave the perimeter, but didn't seem to even hear the men on the wall around the compound. They tore the dog apart and ate it raw directly in front of the wall. Then, according to my friend, 3 men went out to try and dissuade these individuals from continuing their feast. The man in charge attempted to communicate with the individuals, eating the dog in pidgin Arabic, but was promptly assaulted and pushed down by the offending individuals. Then, they were torn apart by fire from the 2 guys with him, as well as C9 fire from the walls. I don't know what happened, but I always said, must have been zombies. No idea what really happened. I was 10 when my great-granduncle died. The situation was a little fucked up. He moved in with his brother's widow, and they had a kind of Boston marriage in their old age. Nanny was my great-grandmother, and she was a very kind woman, but my family claimed she was pretty loose back in the day. So, who knows when they actually started this thing up. Anyway, we'd drive out to the cemetery where my sister is buried, and then we'd visit Nanny, who lived across the street from it. Jojo was always in his easy chair, with his oxygen tank, wheezing and smoking cigarettes occasionally. I would sit and talk with him about World War II, and I later learned I was the only one in the family he talked to about the war. He won the Silver Star in World War II at the Battle of Aachen for routing a German platoon single-handedly. He didn't tell me the story at first. He told me about how when they crossed rivers, his boots, too big for a man 5'2", would fill up with ice water, and he'd spend days dealing with the water damage on his toes. He told me about the time a German potato masher got tossed at him from a German ambush in western France, and he only had time to turn his head and caught the shrapnel in the back of his neck. The medic sewed some of the smaller pieces in, and you could still see them, decades later, against the back of his skin. He could massage his neck to bring them closer to the surface, but he said it was agony. He did it for me once. He really liked me. Never go to war, They'll kill your friends. That's what he told me at 9. He made me promise even. And I did, because I didn't want to hear the end of the stories. He would tell me about the time he and his friends found a German prisoner with half his torso blown up, still breathing, and how he had to shoot the man to spare him, and how when the tanks were hit by bazookas, they sounded like someone banging a hammer against a piece of metal, and then the magazine would blow up, and it would deafen your ears. He told me about the German women who would come out of their houses and feed him brandy and biscuits because they were worried that his unit would rob their house. Little children crying in the streets outside of demolished churches. The zip of Mustangs doing close support fire. Anyway, Jojo was an FO, a forward observer for his unit. They were generally pretty close to the front because their job involved spotting artillery or airstrikes and directing the fire by radio. He said he was a little guy and his radio operator had to be a bigger man because he could not carry the radio. He carried a little M1 carbine, and being up front, he had a lot of occasion to use it. He was in the timber walls. They were part of the strike for Western France and into central Germany through the Ruhr. Basically, Germany's Rust Belt, industrial cities. He told me the story about how he won his Silver Star about 6 months before he died, and I did not ask him for any more stories after that. He was assigned to a company clearing out the eastern suburbs of Aachen preparatory to the main advance. Armor had been held up by German infantry and tank hunter detachments. These men were hard-bitten killers. Waffen SS troops determined to throw the Americans back from their homeland. Jojo hated them, and there were stories of SS troops massacring American POWs and doing grotesque things with their bodies. So the 104th hated the SS and loved killing them. They were clearing out a street and had most of the block squared away when scouts up front reported an incoming German counterattack. It was dusk, and the Germans could only move their armor at night when the American airstrikes were less accurate. They could hear the clanking of the assault guns, but that was all. The Germans wrapped tape or cloth around all of their metal implements, so they made no noise in combat. And they wore camouflage, a mottled green and brown. That made them harder to see at night. Jojo was on the second floor of a German public house with his radio operator and had been calling in 81mm mortar fire on a German machine gun position of the block when he heard the company falling back to set up defensive positions. A runner came up the stairs and told him to report to the captain so that they could figure out where to sight the artillery. The captain told him they expected the German attack straight up the block. There were some alleys that could provide cover for infantry, but they couldn't fit the tanks through them. Jojo was looking at his instruments and his map and calling over to his RO so they could start dropping spotting rounds, smoke shells, to guide the artillery fire. There was a loud bang, and a German assault gun pushed over a part of the barricade they had set up with a 75mm shell. It threw up a ton of dust and smoke, and then machine gun tracers began to light up the street. Germans were spilling into the street, leapfrogging from doorway to doorway, firing rockets into the second floors of houses and tossing grenades that looked like lawn darts which sailed through the air and exploded when they hit the ground. The fire was pretty hot, and the company only had one Zook per platoon, so the AT teams were scattered throughout the block. They got a shell off, and it ricocheted off of side plating on the assault gun side, and the German infantry pumped fire into the building and just hosed it. Parts of the front of the house were falling into the street. I'm writing from memory here and don't want to lie to you. I don't have a great deal of detail on where all these places were, just images in my mind of an old man's memories. The Germans kept coming. They took heavy fire, and Jojo was radioing for support, but the counterattack was general all along the line, and reserves would be at least half an hour in coming, but they'd probably be pushed back, and the battalion radioed back that they had to hold the positions at all costs to prevent a breakthrough. It was different back then. Americans were more lavish of blood. Jojo was a 22-year-old boxer from South Philly, and there were millions of young men like him happy to fight. It was clear they'd have to throw back the enemy. The spotting shells were all over the place. Most kept missing the mark, falling through the roofs of houses and throwing up big columns of white smoke through the holes like chimneys. He said half a platoon was killed when the assault gun literally collapsed on a house on them by shooting out the front foundations. The whole thing just fell on them, and rubble and dust blew out from the demolished front, and the only thing he could see was wild tracer fire, and Germans darting in and out of the smoke like ghosts, fixed determined faces and their little camel caps down on their heads. Their Ford MG was in place behind a bunch of broken down doors and rubble, and the Germans shot it up from the sides coming through the alleys. It was getting bloody, and Jojo was now starting to return fire from the doorway he was huddling in with his little M1. It fired short, .30 rounds, and he tagged a German who fell to the ground and then got up and kept running. He was terrified. His RO caught a stray round and fell and was dying in the street. Jojo grabbed the crank radio and started to call in the fire. He gave them the coordinates and said, "Fire mission, emergency." They radioed back confirmation. He then said, "Fire for effect, fire for effect, fire for effect," yelling to be heard over the gunfire. Then the radio squawked, and someone came on and said, "Belay fire mission." Jojo tried to respond. He figured somehow the Germans were on their communications maybe, and his radio would not work. This is the part of the story you won't believe, but he told me it, and he died 6 months later, and none of it felt like a lie. He said he saw this strange green light start to illuminate the smoke boiling from the rubble and the street. Then the Germans were returning fire in their rear, and Jojo ran out to start firing at them as they turned around. He passed the captain, who was gutshot and crying, and kept pushing forward, changing mags. He was having trouble finding anyone left in his unit, except the half a squad he left behind in the house he was hiding by. But Americans were up ahead, and he figured, somehow, they had fired flares and come up in the rear of the German attack and was wrecking them. The assault gun exploded somewhere up in front of him, the magazine popping off shells, and the explosion shook the houses and broke windows, and Jojo kept running from cover to cover, even though the fire was not going in his direction. He could hear Germans screaming in agony and fear, and eventually he got close enough to stop firing. Afraid he'd hit his own guys. The firing was slackening, and eventually he could only hear the fire in the other sectors. The counterattack was wrecked. He was painfully relieved and started hollowing out his unit so that the Americans did not shoot him. The smoke was dissipated. The green light faded and was gone. He walked forward and found a lot of dead Germans, but no Americans. No Americans at all, but bar and Thompson mags and grenade pins and lots of spent shell casings. Lots of dead and wounded Germans crying and screaming, and pointing behind them up the street, gibbering and covering their eyes. Jojo had seen a lot of this, on his own side even, and didn't pay it any mind. He kept hollering until he heard someone shouting from one of the buildings up the street. It was coming from the front room of an old house that looked like it belonged to a pensioner. He went into the front door, and he could hear shouting upstairs. He walked up the stairs, his rifle at the ready. He came to the landing, and the shouting was now kind of a gurgling moan. He pushed the door to a bedroom open, and his face went white as he told me this part. There was an American, embedded halfway through a sofa and the floor. He was stuck in them, but it wasn't like he had hollowed out a hole through either or anything like that. He was literally in the floor and the sofa, and waving his arms wildly. He was wearing a thick black rubber coat and had a gas mask on. Jojo pulled the mask up off his face, and the man was spitting up blood and started to groan in pain. The man told Jojo to shoot him. Jojo was stunned, and the man made a motion for his rifle, and Jojo just fired instinctively, and the man just sighed and fell forward. He bled onto the floor, out of his mouth. Jojo tried to move the sofa with his foot after a while. The sofa moved, and the man's torso was completely separate from the legs, sticking up and out of the floor. It was like his calves and shin were just open wounds. He could see the bones and the muscles of them as they stood up out of the floor, and stopped when the ankles embedded into the wood. And they weren't bleeding, just like a cutaway in an anatomy textbook. He sat in the corner, staring at this guy for a long time, smoking until he was found. He made it outside and was sitting on the ground when he was picked up by his old unit. 2 weeks later, he was awarded a battlefield commendation and the Silver Star for his heroic work calling in an artillery barrage far beyond minimum safe distance that wrecked a Waffen SS counterattack and saved the 104th Line for the line in the western suburbs of Aachen. Jojo said he never told anyone what he had seen and had no idea what happened to the men in the upstairs bedroom. He thought somehow they knew, someone, he wasn't sure who, and gave him the medal for his silence. He said I was the only person he ever told that story. 6 months later, he died of lung cancer. I lost my fondness for war stories after that.